we go. And we are live. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, aliens, undefinables, everybody out there. Thank you so much for stopping by again. My name's Andre Chumley, and we're here at Make Weird Music. And it's my show, Confronting Creativity, where we do that. We confront creatives and creativity. Tonight's really a special night because this is a gentleman whose music I started out listening to in the 80s, which ages us both a little bit. But started listening to his music, started reading his interviews, got to meet him, got to know him, got to do a few shows. But most of all, watched what he's doing as a fan from a distance, in awe, the influence this man has on so many of us. He's a central figure in the avant-garde scene, in experimental music scene in New York, and nay, around the world. He's collaborated with too many people to list, but orchestras, people like Sonny Sharrock, Jack deJohnette, Hubert Sumlin, the Kronos String Quartet, Nels Cline. The list is truly endless. That's an overused word, but with this man, it nearly is. He's a 2014 Guggenheim Fellow, and he won the 2015 Berlin Prize in Musical Composition at the American Academy in Berlin. He's put out about 6 albums in the last year, it seems, and he's about to play an incredible festival of improvisational music in San Francisco that we're going to talk about. I could be introducing him till 11 o'clock, but I got to stop. Ladies and gentlemen, Elliott Sharp. How are you, Elliott?
Thank you so much, Andre, and it's so great to connect with you again, after all this time. And just trying to maintain here, getting ready. I'm going to LA on Sunday morning to play with Jeff Parker, a duo. And Jeff is one of my favorite guitarists, and favorite people I've known him. And we finally get to play. And we're also both going to play with a new project of Mike Watt and Motoka Honda and Petra Hayden and Joe Berardi called the Mutt Dogs. So after we play our duo set, we're going to play with them, and then maybe I'll sleep for a couple of hours and fly back to New York.
It's
an opening of just to do this again is fantastic because, I used to tour pretty continuously, and then it was nothing. And of course, we all experienced the lockdown in different ways. And so it's great to be playing again in front of audiences. I was just in Germany a couple of weeks ago to do some shows, both improvising shows, solo and with some people, and the premiere of my latest opera, Die Größte Fuge, which is a science fiction opera about Beethoven composing the Grosse Fuge, which is many people, including Igor Stravinsky, said is the first contemporary string quartet. And it's a sci-fi opera, as I said. Beethoven was deaf. He was always suffering from delusions, various kinds of mental illness, probably caused by syphilis. He was a pretty strange, intense guy. And in the opera, he comes loose from his time and visits our time in these fugue states and draws inspiration both from the beauty and the horror of the modern world, and goes back and composes the Grosse Fuge. So that was fun. That was great to finally, that was postponed 3 times because of COVID, and we finally got to run it.
Right. Wow. What a whirlwind of stuff. And that's just what's coming right up. I'll be excited for that because I'm actually a Beethoven fanatic. I actually took a course in college just called Beethoven. So we went pretty deep, and all of his mental issues. And I visited where he was born in Bonn.
I walked by there.
Awesome.
Because I had a week in Bonn just now. So
right.
That's where the premiere was. And
this is great. So needless to say, I will be there. I will be there to hear that. Fantastic, man.
In fact, is there a chat on this?
There's a chat, so people can ask questions, and we can.
And can people access the chat after the live stream is finished?
They can, yes. We leave it up. So we put links, and we'll put
Because what I'll do is I'll put the video of the premiere of the Beethoven opera.
Oh, great!
Is online and can be accessed. So I will send that link to you when we finish.
Fantastic.
Put it That's on the great. Chat, or I will.
And we have our assistant here at Make Weird Music, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. We've got a lot of important links up already for folks. We've got your Bandcamp, your website. So we really like to make sure people know this is the
That's
era
great.
of, yeah, this is the era of direct support. And it's so great that we've lived this long. You're somebody who was doing DIY decades ago, putting out your own records, putting out your own stuff. You know, let's talk about that for a minute. And a compound question. Tell us a little bit more how the 18 months has been for you. You've already said there've been some things moved around, but tell us about that and segue into what it's been like being able to completely control releases, mastering, all your own stuff in these
Well,
years.
completely controlled. That's
Yeah.
that's a whole other
Okay.
discussion. But I'll say the lockdown was a mixed bag. I mean, it was really difficult for my kids who are teenagers because they really rely on the companionship of their friends. Remote schooling did not agree with them. My wife had her problems with it too, but she also thrived a little bit, working on the opera, the video, all of the staging and the set and setting in most of my operas the last few years are done in collaboration with Janine Higgins, my partner. And she does fantastic video work, which people will see on the link.
Amazing.
So she was working on that, working on other projects. For me, I'm a workaholic. And because I have a separate studio where I have all my equipment and where I essentially go every day to punch in and isolate myself and just dig into my work, it was fantastic. I'd go to the studio every day and work. I would compose. I would record my own projects. I would do overdubs. I would do mixes for people. I was doing mastering for other people, which is something I very much enjoy doing. Experimenting, trying different setups, different new little bits of hardware, new little bits of software. Let me try and turn this to get a bit better light. I notice things are getting a little murky here, which they can sometimes in the East Village. Any time of day or night, things can get murky down here.
Sure.
But as I said, I'm very disciplined as a worker, so I was able to get a lot of writing done. Both, composing manuscript for other musicians, working on graphic notation. I premiered some new pieces at Roulette in March of 2021 with an ensemble. No live audience, but with a remote audience.
Yeah. So no, that's great, and I suspected that about you because you're someone who's done so much ensemble work, but so much solo work and solo recording. So that's great to hear that you were able to just, like you said, plug in every day and do stuff. There's a couple specific recent releases. I've been enjoying. I'm going to say it wrong, but the Phlogiston. Love that. I mean, that is just a
great, thank you.
Spiky, wonderful new.
Well, it's my first all synthesized record. I've worked with synthesizers for years. I knew Bob Moog. We were friendly. Don Buchla. They're all like part of the community, especially when I was working in university.
Yeah.
In 1977, 78, I was a graduate student in Buffalo. And my job, my kind of work study, was to take care of the electronic music studio, which was, a labor of love. And I had the keys to the studio. I would lock myself in there on Friday nights when it was officially closed and just work with stuff. We had all this prototype Moog and Baud equipment. And I got to meet a lot of great people, Bob Moog and Don Buchla and Richard Teitelbaum and so many people, I can't even begin to make a list. So I've used synthesizers and samplers since it was possible to use them. Yep. But to do a record, most of my records were based on acoustic or electroacoustic or electric instruments, analog instruments, guitars, reeds, processors, hardware, software processing. This is the first time I set out to do a record completely synthesized. The core of it was my Korg MS-20, which I've had for decades. And it's like one of those desert island synthesizers. If I'm not going to be able to get a Putney, a Synthie, I'm at least quite happy to have my Korg.
Wow.
And I used it with a little Korg, a sequencer. What is it called? The SQ1.
SQ1, the new one.
Great little unit. Great unit. The Volca, the Korg Volca. Mm-hmm. Love this unit.
Which one? The Buchla type one.
The little mini Buchla.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful, and wow, I didn't realize it was the first all synthesized. That's fantastic, and as you know, I'm a synth freak as well. But that's wonderful, and that segues nicely because one of my questions was, what's your thoughts on? Here we are, 2021. Not only is Korg making little Buchla synthesizers, which is unthinkable, but also EMS is still around, Buchla is still around. Dave Smith from Sequential
Yeah.
Circuits is making new machines. Tom Oberheim's alive. He's got new stuff. Roger Lynn, the Moog Company, Make Noise. Did you ever think in 2021 there'd be like an analog explosion? Talk to me about that. What?
Well, one thing you can look at trends is as soon as something becomes scarce, it becomes fetishized. And then prices go up for original equipment. And then someone says, okay, well, let's now try to come up with a new way of doing this. And sometimes they actually come up with an actual rebuild of the original equipment. In some cases, the Arturia plugins I thought were really fantastic. Their plugin of the ARC 2600, I actually like. I mean, the ARC 2600 is a fantastic beast, but a bit unstable. Mm-hmm. And with the plugin, I could have like 8 instantiations of an ARC 2600 and do really phenomenal things. Mm-hmm. So I think it's great. We're going to see CDs coming back. CDs are out of fashion. Labels are putting out cassettes. Cassettes are great for what they are, but I don't think they're the most robust format. I like CDs. You can pack a lot of information. You can get a lot of visual information. They last a long time. Everyone was saying CDs are going to deteriorate. I have CDs from the 80s that still play perfectly.
Yeah,
some first CDs I bought. Once engineers figured out how to master to make them sound good,
right?
And they became a wonderful medium.
That's
now
great.
No one has a CD burner anymore. So
it's true. I think I have one stashed away somewhere, but I'm a weirdo, as you are, in a good way. But yeah, you're right. I know friends who don't even have a CD player.
Right. Well, a lot of kids, they only know MP3s. I mean, I've had students working with a string quartet live, and they go, I had no idea that a string quartet sounded like this, because they've only heard MP3s with earbuds.
Right.
Or like through little computer speakers. They have no idea the richness and the resonance and the overtones, that an acoustic instrument, a well-made acoustic instrument in a good room, is such an all immersive experience,
Immersive. No, that's great. Well, no, that's some great thoughts on these synths, and you're right. It dipped down. They became fetishized, and then, but I'm always happy for. We've sadly lost Bob Moog and Don Buchla, but so happy for people in their 70s like Oberheim and Dave Smith who got to see this happen again, and it's great. Just spend just another minute because that's fascinating that you're using the Volca, and I think this is a little synth that people missed. Can you hold that up again and let people understand what's going on here? Because talk about that, because it's like a Buchla influence.
Yeah, it's very non-linear. There's a lot of kind of aspects just in the way you patch it that you get unexpected results. It has a sequence or two, if you want to have certain patterns remain in memory, which is great. It can be useful. But I love the fact that to play with it is an improvisation. For me, anyway, it's how I approach it. Mm-hmm. And, when I'm working with it, I just try to keep Pro Tools running. So I'm recording everything I have, because it's very difficult to reproduce the things that, and I love that aspect of it. The old synthesizers did not, the memory card was a piece of paper and you'd make marks. And even then, when you tried to recreate them, they weren't always.
It was right.
Yeah. No. So you have to be able to think on your feet. You have to be able to think with your ears, and you have to know your equipment as well as the guitar fingerboard or your saxophone. Something happens when you have that combination of intense knowledge and random factors like the weather. Essentially, what you're doing is interacting with the weather, and that weather might be very personal, or it might be other factors like other musicians you're working with. But the point is that you have to put yourself in an improvisational environment and be ready to think at the moment.
Wow, that's a quote, folks, right there. You got to.
And the Korg MS-20 is the same way. It's why I love the Korg MS-20.
Exactly. No,
unpredictable.
amazing, and they brought that back around too in a smaller version. So it's
And there's a kit. You can actually buy a kit for a lot less money to put together your own version of it. And there was the mini, and now the new ones in custom colors.
Right. I saw that, but I like that though. You got to put yourself in the improvisational moment. I mean, that's been one of your hallmarks, of course. Before we go to some more of the new material, I just want to say hi to some folks. We got some cool people saying hi. See if any questions, folks, just drop them in here. Hi, Henry. Hi, Sharon. Hi, everyone that stopped by. Met Sharon touring with Carbon, right? Yeah, sure. Carmen Lines we're going to talk about that. Very fun and meditative. Awesome. So, okay, great. Just people saying that this is a fun thing so far.
I'm just looking to see if I can, as I said, this iPad is sorry, too much coffee, a recent acquisition.
Okay, yeah, right.
And I haven't, and I'm trying to see if I can view the chat on it.
At the same time, if you just go to our YouTube, Make Weird Music YouTube, you should be able to see it.
Okay, yeah, but I can't have multiple.
Yeah. Maybe on your phone, if you go on your phone in the background, just go to YouTube.
If the problem, as I said, with the server here in this neighborhood, if I put the YouTube stream on my laptop, then it's going to really reduce the bandwidth, and we're going to get very. So I'm just, if a question comes, just relay to
me. And you can send it to me exactly, and we'll find that. Coffee indeed, but circling back to what you said, I want to touch base on your really fantastic and extensive Bandcamp page, but also to say, touch on something you said, and I've got a few students too where they're on that line of sometimes they've only heard MP3s, but I like that a lot of them are discovering FLACs and waves and these other higher, and they get it. They get that, the memory is cheap, right? You get an 8 TB drive for nothing, and people are realizing, and so I applaud you and all the artists who have the high density files available. That's really important on your. And so before we talk about some specific new albums, I want to make sure, and we have the chat, we have it in the chat, your Bandcamp, but what extensive, Carbon's on there, some recent records with Ribot and Halverson. So folks, go check this out. And there's a couple decades worth of material on here, and you could find Elliott on other records too, because he works with so many other people. But really great Bandcamp, and of course on his site you'll find even more music. But let's zoom in on a couple of recent things, because wow, it's staggering and beautiful and inspiring. You've got the aggregate trio and the aggregate quintet records recently. The trio, of course, with Brad Jones and Chad Smith. You've got the Foliage e-book. You've got another duo record with Nels Cline, which I can't wait to hear that. And then you've got a really wonderful new Terraplane album. So zoom in on a couple of those for us, Carmen Lines and Terraplane particularly. Let's start.
Yeah. Well, Carmen Lines is the most recent. It just was released last week, so I'll speak about that. It was pieces that were recorded on a Godin duet multi-act electroacoustic guitar that I modified with a fretless neck and heavier strings. So it's tuned down to the baritone range in a tuning that I designed specifically for this piece to give certain close intervals. And it's a set of gestures. There's a large amount of improvisation in it, but each piece has a kind of gestural roadmap marked out that I follow. It's very severe, probably the most severe record I've made in years. It's very reduced. Each piece delves deeply into one specific gesture. One of them might be tapped with glissandi. A couple of them actually are drones using ebows and close intervals to generate different tone effects. And another one is involved with sliding harmonics. So it's really kind of a late night record, I would say.
Right. Okay.
Zero in on, assuming you've had a pretty weird evening leading up to that late night.
Of course.
Weird in the best way, in the best way.
Okay, so that's Carmen Lines. And that's so.
In Carmen Lines, it's a geopolitical construct designed to delineate the edge of outer space, and that's a territory that I like to operate in whenever possible.
Okay,
You know,
so I was
this
going to ask
notion
what
of
that
music.
means.
You know, I like music to find its balance in a number of poles. So on the one hand, when I'm improvising, I like the improvisation to feel as if it's a carefully structured composition, so it has a sense of inevitability. And when I'm writing completely through composed music, like when I'm writing an opera, when I'm writing a string quartet or an orchestra piece, you don't have the luxury of a lot of rehearsal time usually. So every little black dot is exactly where it has to be on the score. But for those pieces, I want it to feel as if there's a sense of spontaneity, unpredictability, danger, like what's going to happen next? Maybe we don't really know. So finding that balance. At the same time, I like music to be grounded in, you know, it is far deep in the earth as you can go, you know, really down in the center, and yet extend out into abstraction, into infinity, you know, without, at the risk of sounding too cosmic, you know. But I like when the limits are limitless, you know.
Right.
I want to go to the asymptotic, we call it in the mathematical sense. The asymptote is the line that you will approach but never reach.
Okay. Oh, okay. I didn't know that term, and I'm a bit of a math nerd. That's great. I also, you know, the Carmen lines. I know I'd seen that word years ago, but thank you for bringing that back. The edge of space, is that kind of obviously a very indefinable value that is, but
well, people had to come together, you know, political organizations meeting with scientific organizations, say, well, here we can say space begins here because the density of the atmosphere is so low, or the atmosphere has completely ended, or there's a certain amount of cosmic radiation appearing at this point. And so it's been defined, I think, like, and there's even some disagreement about it, of course.
Sure, right. Probably especially as we get better measuring tools too, because then you go, well, now we can measure this penumbra or whatever. Yeah.
Or
well,
become at its worst, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos saying, no, this is the edge of space. No, this.
right.
I mean, let them both go out there and, you know, anyway, go down there. No, we don't need more billionaires deciding.
Wow, man, we at least need to tax them, right?
Yeah.
I've always loved how you've weaved science into the music. It's kind of a left brain, right brain thing, where you have that capacity to have these pieces that discuss these pretty serious mathematical, scientific, fractal ideas. But then a lot of your music is just dreams, human, you know, magic, and so I really love that. Talk to me a little bit about something that I've seen come up over and over in so many of your records. This idea of biological processes and how you've talked about those, and how but things growing, and I guess mycology is somewhere in there. Talk about how you came to that, and why it's so important over the years.
Well, you know, I mean, I was a science geek. I really thought I was going to be a scientist. When I was 17, I had a National Science Foundation grant to be an assistant to a scientist at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. Now, the thing was, I just gotten an electric guitar a few weeks before I went out to Pittsburgh for the summer. I spent a lot of my time in the lab building fuzz boxes. You know, that's my research.
Yeah.
I got midnight to 4 a.m. slot on the radio station, WRCT, still a great station, and played. They had a fantastic library, so I discovered all of this amazing music. Synthesizer music, Todd Dockstader, one of my great heroes, and Morton Subotnick, who's still a friend of mine, you know. And,
still here,
and a lot of non-Western music became very important, free jazz. I mean, everything. In fact, I got fired for playing too much weird music.
Oh,
so,
too much weird music.
Yeah, it's another, and you can never have enough weird music. That's another story. But at the same time, I was always interested in scientific processes. It's a mapping of the real world, just as mathematics is an abstract mapping of processes that we see at work in, you know, I mean, geometry, trigonometry, algebra. These are all things that play out in the real world.
Real world.
I mean, it's a question of figuring out how to analyze them and reducing them to a theory. And once you have numerical theory, you can apply that to other realms. I mean, Iannis Xenakis, another composer who was a huge influence for me and who I discovered in that same summer of 1968, mapped stochastic processes, chance operations in a different way than Cage did. Clouds, the way clouds form and transform. That was very important for Xenakis's music. Arcs, he was an architect as well. So literally architects.
Yeah, right.
He was Le Corbusier's assistant. So he would draw these maps of arcs and then have string instruments play them. His pieces, Pieta Procta, metastasis, all make use of metastasis in the way cells divide and grow. So there was an influence there. Speaking of Xenakis, now I will digress a fair amount because I love to digress. One of the recording projects that has just been completed, I just finished mixing, is called Minus X. And this is a collaboration with Henry Kaiser, an old and dear friend of mine, great guitarist. The bass player, Brandon Lopez, a fantastic musician, and Scott Amendola, drummer. Pardon me as I reach for name. Have a little dip in the afternoon of memory where names get a little murky, But what we did was take Xenakis pieces and each individually overdub on them. We chose a set of Xenakis works and then took away Xenakis and just left our improvisations, which I mix, which have an incredible coherence as defined by the Xenakis piece, which was the score for our improvisations. So this will come out early next year on the same label, Eratotox, that put out Phlogiston.
Okay. Oh, great. It's, not only is it a year filled with releases already, but it's always so great that anytime I check in with you, there's some. It's like being in an airport, and you kind of can see all the planes coming, and there's always one. There's a regular, and I love it. I love that you touched on that. It's discipline, right? You get up. You have. You tell us about that. You're in your studio then every day. And you happen to have a real purpose-built little space there in New York. So
it's a playground for me, really. People forget the term play music, and it is so enjoyable for me to have the equipment that I need. There's a lot of guitars, basses, stringed instruments that I've built, because instrument building has also been a part of my work for many years, inspired by Harry Parch. And then I have my little synth corner with the chord, and a circuit bent speak and spell, and a couple of Moog modules, the ring modulator and the low pass filter, an electro-harmonics microsynth, an old electro-harmonics ring modulator. Sometimes I'll bring in, I have some Eventide modules, the pitch factor and time factor. Sometimes I'll bring those in, the chord sequencer, just anything, the Volca, anything then that pedals. I try to keep the pedal stuff separate from the synthesizing, but sometimes, of course, they play an important role in working together. And then there's a rack, with some hardware processors, some of which I've had for many years. The Eventide, the H3000, the Digitech, TSR-24, filter factory, an ancient Ibanez, analog delay, some preamps and compressors, mic pre's, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all part of the, I think of it as one integrated instrument, really. Because when we're working, you never can tell, especially if a project is open-ended, it can take you into any direction. I never know where the music demands that I go. And the music defines it, some pieces are predetermined. If I'm working on a film score for someone, then I have a pretty specific plan. And I like doing that because it takes it out of my hands.
Right.
There's that framework, someone else discipline, that I'm trying to work with. Very enjoyable for me to do that because it's like being an actor. I've done a couple of scores for Jonathan Berman, a filmmaker who lives in California and who used to be in New York. He has a film called The Schwitz, a film called The Commune, and a film called Calling All Earthlings, which was the last one I did for him. Okay. And they all have very specific needs that had to be covered. And so it was a pleasure.
And that kind of defines that difference. I'm glad you said that of when it's someone else's thing and there's kind of a roadmap, because yeah, we've seen you go in and out of that, and free improvisation of course is one of the paramount tools. By the way, you mentioned Henry Kaiser, and of course we love him, and he was on this show a couple months ago. So yeah, a dear friend of the channel, and one of your oldest and dearest friends. And I have to say also, I'm very proud tonight on another level, because having you here completes the trilogy, because I've had as guests David Torn and Vernon Reid. So now we've had the complete guitar.
The guitar yes.
The guitar blick.
Yes, as some friends like to call it.
Yeah, that's
well, that's really. I mean, Torn is really an old and dear friend. I've known David probably since 1973, 74.
Yeah.
You know, and so to finally, work together again, we chat not infrequently. He's also on this latest meta guitar that you're on.
Oh, great! That's great. Yeah. And that's right, folks. I was invited by Elliott. I'm very honored to. We hadn't worked together in years, but he invited me to be part of a new compilation that's coming out, and I'm honored to be on that. Tell the folks the name of that and when it's.
Yeah, well, it's a series called "I Never Met a Guitar," and I the name derived from a Will Rogers phrase where he said, "I never met a person that I didn't like." And so as I put, I never met a guitar that I didn't like. And right. So I just invited friends. I have a huge list of friends, and just going down them one at a time. Well, here's volume 1, here's volume 2. The first 4 volumes were done on the Clean Feed label out of Lisbon. And then volume 5 was done on the Klon Gallery label out of Vienna. And this next one, volume 6, will be as well. So that should be out probably in the winter.
Okay, great. Well, we'll definitely do a little feature here. We're starting to do a lot more features on new releases. So,
great.
Whenever you've got something you'd like us to know about, please do. Speaking of improvisation, we have a really wonderful thing coming up that you're part of, the Other Minds Festival. Folks, this is an interview that might be in San Francisco. It's there on the 14th to 17th of October. So coming up in less than a week. And I'm just going to say, I'll just hit a few of the people who are going to be there. Elliott Sharp will be there. William Parker, Mary Halverson, Tyshawn Story, Anthony Braxton, Zena Parkins, Jen Ziu, Wadada Leo Smith, Myra Melford, Hamid Drake, Patricia Nicholson, King Britt, Roscoe Mitchell. I'm not even getting started. Wow, what an incredible festival. And tell us a little bit about that, about your involvement in this Other Minds Festival.
Well, Harry Bernstein was the curator and advisor for this particular edition, and he wanted people who were composers and improvisers as well. And both the grandmasters like Anthony Braxton and Roscoe Mitchell, and some of us who are, I would say, second generation, and then some of the youngsters.
Right.
So, yeah, no, it's fantastic. And the program that I'm on the 17th, is Myra Melford and Mary Halverson duo, again, 2 dear friends, my solo set, Anthony Braxton and James Fay duo. So it's really going to be a wonderful program.
It looks amazing, and we put the link there. And if you're anywhere in striking distance, folks, check it out. And check out the site, otherminds.org, because there's a lot of wonderful links. There's archives. There's broadcasts on here. And I hadn't heard of it till I was kind of checking out what Elliott's been doing. And it's really, the curation of improvised music that's going on around the world. And it's really great that we have it in our great cities here in the U.S. and some small cities too. Right near me, there's one called the Big Ears Festival coming up in a few months. Do you know about that one, Elliott? Big Ears?
I know about that one. My agent has pitched them. Friends of the director has pitched me to them for years. He's not interested.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't think about such things. There's
no. But we both know at festivals, agents come and go, and the booking people come and go. So you'll be there, I think, because it does change when you do. And the other thing I wanted to mention, because I live in a city of improvisers, and I'd like to invite you. But if you're anywhere near Knoxville, I live in Asheville, and the reason you should be here is because the headquarters of Moog is here.
Right. No, I know.
Yeah. The Moogseum is here, which is separate and run by Bob Moog's wonderful daughter, Michelle Moog-Kusa. And then Make Noise Synthesizers is here.
Oh, I didn't realize they were there too.
Yeah.
They make
amazing, right? So we got to get you down here and do some workshops, do some shows, but visit places like the headquarters of Moog and all that. So so that festival is coming up. That's and you just went through the various playing you're going to do there. Let's see if there's any questions before we go to the next segment here.
Do you know what I was going to say also for the Other Minds Festival? And I want to circle back to Terraplane because I didn't get a chance to talk.
Yes, we'll do that. Yeah.
But for the Other Minds Festival, I'm going to play my Strandberg 8-string guitar bass. It's an extended range instrument with slanted frets, so the intonation and the feel of it are optimized across the fingerboard. And I've worked with extended range instruments for a long time, going back to my double necks, which were so heavy that I finally couldn't take them on tour anymore. And then I went to an 8-string guitar bass that was built for me by Doug Henderson in 1996. And now working with Strandberg in the last few years, his 8 strings are wonderful. I have a 7-string from him as well.
Wow.
And they're great instruments. Great. So Terraplane, I love playing blues. And when I first heard country blues, it struck me so powerfully also because I was interested in history and the history of the Civil War and how slavery was such a defining aspect of American life for a certain half of the country, shall we say, and still is, even though they don't like to. When I talk to my kids about history, I said, a lot of corporations realize that, well, sure, let's get rid of slavery. If we don't own the slaves, then they have to pay for their own housing and food. People are still slaves, and a lot of people they don't realize it. People who think of themselves as managers and vice presidents are slaves because they're divided so that they take on the interests of management rather than the interest of. But enough of a rant. I don't want to go down too far.
There's a lot there.
Plant a few seeds,
Yeah.
But political involvement has always been part. I mean, blues is a very personal music, but there's always been a subcurrent of blues that is about the situation to live, to be an African American in America in the South. I love Blind Lemon Jefferson's music, and there's one of his songs, Hangman Blues, and it's so chilling and plaintive. And when you think about when it was recorded in the late 20s, it's very easy to imagine the person who's being hanged, and his voice, he makes him sound like a young boy. He's being lynched. It's not someone who went through justice. It's someone who is being about to be lynched, and that's what that song is about. So with the BLM movement, and I've been involved as someone who's conscious. I've tried to find ways to be involved. I mean, I work with a lot of African-American musicians, I have many close friendships for many years, and blues. I mean, there's always been a relationship between Jews and blacks in this country. It's one of the reasons why J. Edgar Hoover had to sow the seeds of distrust between the black and Jewish community, because so much of the civil rights movement was funded by Jewish citizens.
Couldn't happen.
Anyway, I mean, there's a lot of discussion there. But, I mean, I've been playing blues since I first picked up a guitar. I didn't have a broken wine bottle for my slide guitar, but I did have a test tube because I was a song geek, So I had my cheap pawn shop guitar. I laid it on my lap and used a test tube, and I said, I'm going to learn how to play this, and I heard it, and I had to channel it in my own way. So it came out, which was why when I heard Sonny Sharrock for the first time, Sonny he was playing with a slide sometimes. He was playing sheets of sound. He was playing, the first time I heard Sonny play live
when was that?
1969 with Herbie Mann's group in Elmira, New York. Right. And they played the Beatles song Come Together. And Sonny's solo, he set the reverb all the way up on his twin reverb. And he was playing with the slide, and his guitar sounded like an office building collapsing with all the windows being shattered, you know.
Is,
And of course, Sonny got to be a friend and collaborator. You know, we hung out
course.
many times and played together a number of times. And,
Mhm.
you know, Sonny was, you know, just a fantastic person and influence. And you could always hear the blues element in Sonny's playing and outer space, you know. Sonny lived in both places. Well, you know, the Space Ghost soundtrack, they did Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Sonny did the,
sure. And then
Yep,
the other connective tissue, Lance, our dear friend Lance Carter, a childhood friend of mine. Lance,
the drummer in Terraplane for a while.
Yeah. Let's, you know, there was an interview recently, and I'll take that opportunity. Let's spend a minute and talk about the amazing Lance Carter. I get emotional because you don't know this, but our moms were friends. They worked together at the college, Middlesex County College. I met Lance as a teenager, and I didn't even play guitar. I was like 17. I started late, and I asked Lance about an Ovation guitar in a pawn shop. Lance Carter was the person who I said, well, is that a good brand? Like, what do I? And he goes, yeah, you know, depending on which one it is. So that's how important Lance is. But for the audience, Lance Carter, wonderful, amazing drummer, played with Sonny Sharrock for many years. He's on Space Ghost and a few other records. Cassandra Wilson worked with her, and he also worked with Elliott and with Percy Jones and all kinds of wonderful people. Talk to us about Lance for just a minute.
Well, he's just, I mean, besides being a sweet guy, you know, just it's so enjoyable to hang out with. And, you know, for me, when I put a band together that's going to be on the road, of course, it's assumed that they're great musicians. You know, that's the first part. But the hang is really important. You're going without sleep for however many weeks in trains and vans and planes and cars. And, you know, you have to be able to hang with these people. You have to be able to enjoy each other's company, because music isn't just notes, you know, it's psychic communication, it's chemical communications, it's pheromonal handshaking, you know. I call this thing socioacoustics, the nature of people playing music together in different environments. And so Lance was just a pleasure to work with, you know, and his groove was so deep, and he understood. You could define a song, and Lance always had the right feel for it. You know, and the grooves that he came up with certain Terraplane songs, and after Lance sadly passed from a rare form of cancer, there have been other drummers, and also wonderful drummers, people I love working with. But Lance's grooves for these tunes were the model for these songs. No one could really change them, because in a way he composed the absolute perfect groove for these songs.
Yeah, no, that's a great memory, and still we miss Lance, and are in touch with his widow Lisa and some of his family. So people, go look that man up. That's a real loss for the New York area.
And Bob Musso's band, Machine Gun.
Oh, that's right, Bob Musso, who Bob was on a couple months ago. Sure, a lot of records with Bob, and so Lance Carter, folks, pay him a little honor there. Sonny Sharrock, did you happen to see, Elliott, the Summer of Soul movie where there's
absolutely. But I mean, there were so many great segments there.
Yeah.
I mean, Mahalia Jackson had me just so, that performance was so incredible. But, you know, I was a little irritated because the trailers for the film made Sonny's presence out to be a lot more than it actually was. You didn't get to hear him playing, just a few tiny snippets, and they put it in the context of the anger of the civil rights movement. And of course, Sonny was very, very conscious and smart, but Sonny was a man of huge heart, and there was so much love in his playing, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was directly inspired by John Coltrane and Farrah Sanders to find that sound. And we should have been able to hear that. You know, a musician, and every musician I talked to saw that film, said, yes, we were really glad to see Mahalia Jackson, Stevie Wonder's drumming, incredible, you know, but there should have been more music, maybe a little less talking.
Yeah. Well,
don't talk over the music. Let us hear it.
That's right. The one good thing, and these things happen in the 21st century, and streaming makes it, you know, possible with movies. Let's cross our fingers that Questlove says, "Hey, here's the director's cut or part 2 or the music cut," because you got to do something with that footage. I mean, we can't let that rot away. So here's hoping. Let's get a petition, folks. Questlove, full Herbie Mann segment, you know.
Well,
Oh,
you know, Don McKenzie, the current drummer in Terraplane,
uh,
is working with Mark Kelly, the bass player from Roots.
oh,
So
right.
maybe we can get a direct message
There
through
we go.
Don.
There we go.
Let's
Now,
see. I'll
now
see if I,
so that's wonderful. It's a new Terraplane album, folks. Please check that group out. There's a separate band camp for Terraplane too, so we can get a link
right. Well,
for
there's
that.
two albums that I did. One that came out just in the beginning of lockdown called Kick It Six, which
Right.
is an instrumental Terraplane. It's the more psychedelic side of Terraplane, which is that confluence between EDM, post jungle, drum and bass, warped, fractured beats, and
Right. Right. Oh.
psychedelicized blues guitar. So it's all instrumental pieces. Kick
Oh.
It Six is a term that, yeah, there it is, that blind, oh man, again, this afternoon thing.
You're out of your element. It's 1 a. It's not 1 a.m. So
No. Well, you know what? You know, usually during the daytime, I try to keep a steady caffeine drip
sure.
going. And Blind Willie McTell, how could I forget?
There we
I
go. Of
love
course.
Blind Willie McTell's music.
Sure.
And Blind Willie McTell, when he's about to do a wild fingerpick guitar solo, go kick it six.
Oh.
The six being, you know, the six string
strings. Yeah.
instrument.
Okay.
He doesn't say kick it 12 when he's going to do it on a 12 string.
Yeah, but that's great.
So these are, you know, kind of very psychedelic beats. Now, the one that just came out a couple of months ago is called Century. And as you can see, that map of the United States shows the slave states, which is a very interesting overlapping with the red states that currently trying to diminish voting rights as much as possible. You know, and of course they've made inroads in a lot of rural areas.
Sure. And ironically, it overlaps with the high COVID rate map. If we were to
yes,
put that
absolutely. And in fact, the original cover design was going to be the COVID map because, but my designer, my partner Janine Higgins, also felt that the connection was a little too abstract. We really wanted to make it explicit.
Okay.
So we used this great map that she found.
No.
And these pieces started out. There was a book published in 1920 by Nancy Cunard, who was the Cunard heiress, an English woman who had a Black lover. And she wanted to introduce the world to African-American poetry and literature and art. And she put out this book in 1920 called Negro, and it was very controversial. Not everyone who participated in it was happy with it because of some of the business aspects of it. But still, it introduced so many life-changing, important poets and writers to the white world.
Right.
A German producer at the Bavarian radio asked me to set 5 of these songs to music for this radio program that they were doing on this book, Negro. So I asked Tracy Morris and I asked Mikkel Banks. Tracy is a fantastic poet, one of the founders of the Black Rock Coalition.
Exactly, yeah.
A dear friend for many years. She's been a singer in Terraplane. We've done duo shows. We've curated things of each other's. You know, we've worked on a lot of projects together.
Yeah.
And Mikkel Banks, I've been a fan of Mikkel for years, his work with Burnt Sugar Orchestra.
Right, Greg Tate's great group.
Yeah. So I asked Mikkel, and one of the aspects of these lyrics was the use of the N-word. Now, you know, my mother's a Holocaust survivor. My parents, I grew up, I came of age in the civil rights era. And, you know, my parents said, you don't use words that demean anybody. You know, you don't use these kind of slang street words for people of any color, of any race, of any creed, of any religion, including words. You know, we would, you know, as Jews, we would use all kinds of derogatory terms among ourselves to make, you know, as all people do.
Yeah.
You know, this is part of what sets you apart and say, hey man, we are this. But still, I was very wary about this, using these words. But Mikkel Banks said, I'm going to use these words and I'm going to own them. Tracy said, I am not going to use those words, but I'm going to do the research and find out what African Americans called themselves at that time to counteract the use of the N-word. And so these songs that I wrote, and I'm really happy with the way these songs came out. They owe an allegiance to a band of gypsies, to Curtis Mayfield. Then we wrote these 5 songs, and then I wanted to complete an album, so I brought Eric Mingus in, and we wrote a bunch of songs together. So I wanted to bring in the Curtis Mayfield influence, Jimi Hendrix, of course, Stevie Wonder in a little more abstract way. They're kind of hard funk songs. There's one song that is a very much you hear a tribute to Earl Hooker, the great guitarist, in the slide guitar part that was stolen by Led Zeppelin. But also he recorded this one instrumental track, and then they brought Muddy Waters to sing over it, and that became a big hit for Muddy Waters, which was then stolen by Led Zeppelin.
By Zeppelin again, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. No, we could do a couple hours just on the blues, man, because, you have consistently, decades now, paid beautiful homage and honor and respect to the blues, and it weaves in and out, and I love when it shows up. You might be doing some very strange solo thing on your guitar bass, and then you go into a blues thing, a pentatonic thing.
You can't separate it. It's goes back to this book by Leroy Jones,
right?
Amiri Baraka.
Amiri, sure.
When he talked about Sonny Rollins and Cecil Taylor and Coltrane and Rahsaan Roland Kring, he said you always, no matter how out they get, always hear the blues. Ornette Coleman, of course, there's always a blues influence. And for me, my influence is as much equally physics and mathematics and Xenakis and Stockhausen and Georgi Ligeti as it is Blind Willie McTell and Robert Johnson, Otis Rush. I mean, my son, his middle name is Otis, for all the great Otis Rushes, and the Otis Rush, Otis Spann.
Yeah.
I mean, really, they're...
That's lovely.
And the Latin Otis comes from the word to hear, to listen.
Oh, right.
The bone, the ear, the bones in the ear, the otic bones, O-T-I-C.
I see the word root. Yeah.
So, unfortunately, blues has become like this kind of frat boy party music.
Right.
And I hate that aspect of it, because blues, when it was at its peak in the 60s, was always incorporating modern rhythms. You heard West Side Soul, they were incorporating boogaloo rhythms, and so it always stayed current until it comes to a period of looking backwards. But I believe in all the music I do, whether it's Terraplane, whether it's my more abstract, my string quartet music, my electronic music, I want to have one foot in the past and one foot in the future. And I've said this time and again in interviews. And that puts your ass directly in the present,
What a great quote, man. That's a t-shirt. Let me go to a couple questions if there's any. Sharon saw Amiri Baraka speak. Yeah, that's great. Henry Lohman's here. Hi, Henry. Also, he saw the Sun Ra Orchestra. Todd Reynolds is here. Hey, Todd Reynolds. Another.
Oh, hey, Todd.
Yeah, you guys are old friends too. So thank you so much, folks, for being here. Here's a question. Great. Henry says, will Elliott be doing any future collaborations with Marcus Reuter, as he did in Philadelphia a few years ago?
I hope so. Marcus and I stay in touch. When I was living in Berlin, we lived in Berlin for a year and a half, beginning in 2015. And I did a session with Marcus, just playing solo with him doing live processing. And Marcus is very busy. I'm hoping that he gets a chance to finish that someday. Hopefully someday soon. I'd love to see that out. And Marcus, he's just a fantastic musician in person. So I welcome the opportunity to do something again with him.
Amazing musician, another dear friend. I'm also glad you brought up Eric Mingus, who's another dear friend, because folks, look up Eric as well. Go learn about Terraplane if you somehow don't know them. And the wonderful Eric Mingus, his vocals, his poetry. Man, what a powerful figure. I think he's back, him and his family, they're back in the States, I think, right?
They're back living in the U.S. now. And in fact, we're going on tour later this month in Europe.
Oh, great.
With concerts in Bologna, at the Angelica Festival, in Vienna, in Klagenfurt, Austria, in Umea, Sweden, and in Milano, Italy.
Right. And
so they're doing our Fourth Blood Moon duo.
Fantastic.
which, yeah, no, Eric, I mean, is a dear friend for many years now. And the first jazz record I bought, I found out about jazz because of John Coltrane's obituary in the New York Times. I said, well, who is this guy? And I called my friend Steve up, and he said, well, my father has some Coltrane records. So we put on Live at the Village of Vanguard again, and I was absolutely taken away by it. It really. And so I went down to the Alexander's department store, where I was soon to be working as their men's shoe salesman, much to my horror for a miserable number of months of my high school years. But in the bargain bin, I found Charles Mingus. Oh yeah, still one of my favorite records. And Mingus's approach to the blues is absolutely part of the DNA of Terraplane.
Huge. It's a huge thing. Yeah. And of course, if people would ask or wonder, yes, Eric Mingus is the son of Charles Mingus. So he's, very much his own brilliant, creative person, but he happens to be carrying on that family.
And if I interject just before that, again, going back to Cecil Taylor, the next record I bought at Alexander's was Cecil Taylor's Unit Structures. And over the years, I got to know Cecil and be friends with Cecil and hang out with him on a number of occasions. And Don McKenzie, the Terraplane drummer, and I in 2012, because Don would go over to Cecil's and take care of him whenever he needed help on things as he grew older. We recorded an album with Cecil.
Oh, great.
Called An Oblique Plane of Existence. Cecil heard Don and I playing duo and said, I want to have my poetry over your, he called it psychedelic funk. So we recorded the stuff. We finally mixed it. Now, unfortunately, with Cecil's passing, his estate is in litigation. So we're hoping that that'll get clarified so we can release this fantastic music. And it's one of the few records dedicated to Cecil's poetry.
Wow, so Mackenzie, Sharp, and Cecil Taylor doing poetry.
Or Cecil Taylor with Mackenzie and Sharp.
Of course, yes. It'll be a Cecil Taylor record then. Yeah, please make sure we know about that here at Make Weird Music.
Absolutely.
All right, we're gonna wrap because I know you got to run. I got just a couple more things. Here's a question from Sharon. What would you say are the most unusual instruments you own today, including whether you've built them or not? What's the most unusual?
Probably the most unusual are the ones I've built. Now let's take a little walk. Let's hope that the stream isn't interrupted. And
wireless,
I will show some of these through the studio. Well, let me just show the synth corner here.
Oh.
There's a couple of weird little instruments. There's a electric mando. The angle of this is little electric mandola and my Jaguarino, which is my take on what a Jaguar should be. These are the double necks and the 8-string. Let's see if we can get the angle. The angle is hard with this camera on this tablet. Maybe if I do this.
We're getting a nice. Oh, look at that!
The lighting isn't so.
There's the first double
neck. The first double neck from 1984 with a MIDI pickup, and then the second double neck from 1990. Maybe I can hold it up into the light and get it better.
That's a classic, man. I've seen you. I've seen you at about 6 New York clubs with that one over there.
And then the first 8-string that I mentioned before, built neck by Carla Greco and Doug Henderson, made the body. And that instrument had a trackpad mounted on it in the early years of its existence, so I could control max patches live with it.
Right.
And here are there's a bunch of guitars that are in flux.
Sure.
This one is a Vietnamese guitar that's used in the avant-garde music, and
scalloped kind of
deeply scalloped. And in fact, if you go to the website Please Kill Me, which is a kind of punk literature archive, I have an article that I wrote there about Van Gogh music, which is some of my favorite guitar music of all time. Now, this is the violinoid.
Oh my God.
Can you see it? Yeah. That I made in the 70s sometime. And it's a violin neck mounted on some scrap wood with pickups. And double bridge length, so you can get different overtones from it. This is a Gittler guitar.
Oh, that's really rare.
I used to see Alan Gittler, and I knew his marketing guy. I used to run into him. He'd stand in Astor Place and play his Gittler guitar, and we'd chat. He gave me a demo cassette. He wanted me to put it out on Zor, although that never happened. But Alan was a sweet guy, a brilliant guy.
He passed away, right?
He moved to Israel. He moved to Israel.
Yeah.
No, this is called the Viola Maria. It's a mixture of viola, a dulcimer, and a sumsumia, which is a Palestinian Bedouin zither that they make from oil cans and scrap wood and the wire from communications from the Israeli army. They dig up the wires and use them for strings, which I think is fantastic. I also put some springs on it. It has a piezo mic built into this bridge and then individual pickups. So it has 3 outputs. So it generates quite a wide stereo field. Now, the last one is the Arches H-line. We're getting to the light. And I built this one last year during lockdown as well.
Okay.
From a bunch of stuff in my junk box. And so it has 4 outputs. As you can see, there's, I think you can see.
What are they sending out?
Each pickup has its own output. So each pickup has its own string length.
Right.
There's the long string length, which is played more conventionally like a guitar. And then the short string lengths, which have these, let's see if we can see them, these metal plates on them for doing glissandi and tapping.
Oh.
So it's really, I would say more, you could call it a string board more than anything else. And it is dedicated to Hans Reichel.
Okay.
Brilliant. Let me turn this, there we go. Let me do some backflips. Hans Reichel was a friend, a fantastic improviser and instrument builder. His instruments were absolutely beautiful and unique. Yeah. And so I wanted to have these parts that I want to make something dedicated to Hans. And the name Arches H-line is an anagram of Hans Reichel. So it's a little bit of
that makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, we played together on a number of things. He's also the inventor of the doxophone. Besides his beautiful guitars, he created this strange bowed wooden instrument called the doxophone that's capable of a very wide range of sounds. It's like really an acoustic synthesizer.
I'm just kind of speechless at what we just saw and how unique everything was. And in a way, because you've done so much altering of regular guitars and preparing guitars, it's like you've made prepared guitars in a way. Like they each have their own strange,
Well, I think of them all as orchestration. They're all extensions of the sound. Because the sound, a very important text for me was Walter Benjamin, the philosopher. And everyone should read some of his writings, especially the reproduction of art in the age, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, which foresaw, he wrote in the 1920s, foresaw how the widespread dissemination of culture will devalue it.
Right.
It will make it worthless because everything is copied and copied.
Mm-hmm,
but he wrote a text called The Task of the Translator, which is about the essence of translation. He was translating Baudelaire from French into German. And it's not about just getting the words right. Of course, that's important, but getting the essence right. And so for me, the creative impulse is something that resides in each of us. And then the output, it's a question of how to find the right part of the spectrum. Maybe it should be sound, maybe it should be something visual, maybe it should be cooking food or taking a walk or doing nothing, maybe just listening,
Right.
And that's guided my output for a long time. I talk about it a lot in Irrational Music, my book that's a combination of memoir and music theory and cultural discussion. And that's easy to find online. MIT Press distributes it.
That's amazing, man. What a great thought, too, that the creative spark is just there. And then it's about plugging it in to any number of things, including silence.
Yes, we all have it, and people are kind of beaten down into thinking they're not creative.
Yeah,
Everybody has it. To live is to be creative, to interact with your environment. You
that's it.
have to have wits. You have to be able to improvise.
Uh,
Everybody is an improviser at heart. They have to develop. They have to believe it and understand.
yeah,
You know,
that's
rather than being programmed, by the strictures of society and the workaday world. I mean, we've all had to deal with it at different times. But
no, this is why we're here. This show, confronting creativity and embracing it and understanding it and cultivating it. So you've added some beautiful uh, quotes and ideas to that, Elliot. It's awesome. Um, uh, 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 address one or two other things. Someone,
yeah,
Wes Darling said something wonderful that ties in with what I was going to thank you for. Also, Wes Darling says, I appreciate an artist having the courage to talk about civil rights. Clearly, most of us do not feel comfortable doing so or don't get the necessity of respecting compassionate values. And it's true. Elliot, you've always spoke out. You've always tied in American history, world history, and you've also always stood up for what's right. And you've always pointed out that important familyhood of black and brown people and Jewish people and other people,
well, it's all everybody,
LGBT, everybody,
You know,
LGBT people,
we're
immigrants
all
that, yeah, of all colors.
we're all from Africa originally.
Yeah,
Modern humanity started in
yeah,
Africa. And
but
a fantastic book for anyone who's interested in that is called Non-Zero by Robert
mm,
Wright. It came
okay,
out, I don't know, 20 years ago. And he looks at evolution, both physical, for those who believe in it. Let's
yeah,
let's
yeah,
hope everybody here.
understand it, right?
But he looks at the book is in two halves: biological evolution and cultural, political, social, economic evolution.
Mm,
And he shows in both how cooperation, non-zero sum game analysis of society has always been much more successful than zero sum game, which is one
right.
winner, one
Hmm.
loser.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
and it's just a beautiful take on how we look at the world. We are all connected. You can't
we
if
are.
you begin to study. An important philosopher for me was Baruch Spinoza. When I
Hmm.
was a kid, I had to go to Hebrew school. I was stuck in I mean, whatever, I
Hmm.
endured.
Sure,
But I became an atheist early on,
right.
thanks to the rabbi telling us about Spinoza. He said, and these are the philosophers who are trying to destroy Judaism. And he talked about Spinoza, who saw God in the infinitely microscopic, in every cell, from the infinitely microscopic to everything in the universe. I said, yeah,
Galaxies.
I'm
Yeah.
down. I'm
That's
down with
my
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've spoke about that, and you've spoke about the difference between culture and religion, and also I like that you painted the broad picture there, but you also have never shied away from the specifics, the bullshit that we're enduring, the little political things, and I applaud that because a lot of artists shy away. I'm gonna end with a tie-in of your love of technology and guitar synthesis and something you said on a TV show, and I'm going to have you react to it. And I'm going to get there by I almost forgot this. One of the other, we've done some bills together and stuff, but one
Yeah.
of the first places we met was I did a record by a band called False Virgins,
Absolutely.
and
That was our first. Yeah. You were playing
yeah,
bass.
I was playing bass.
Yeah.
What a memory! And so I put the link up there, folks. Check it out. False Virgins, Infernal Doll, by a brilliant band leader, David Aaron Clark,
Yeah.
who we could do a retrospective. Brilliant writer. He did chapbooks. He wrote a few books. He was an editor at Screw and a couple
Right.
other, porno magazines. But
Gigs.
really good music. And so Elliot did a a guitar synth solo triggering a sampler, and I tell you, what is this? I'd never seen anyone do that, so that heavily influenced me. So I thank you for that. But I'm going to segue, and I'm gonna give you a little blast from the past here. We're gonna look, folks. Here's Elliott Sharp on a wonderful show called Night Music,
Oh, that was
and
incredible.
and
Take part.
I'm just gonna go right to the quote because it also ties in with what we're talking about, civil rights, because here's this man doing this wild high tech thing, but I want you to listen to what he says to the wonderful David Sanborn about the samples. Here we go.
Why don't you tell us about this next piece of music we're going to play?
Okay, well, it's called Free Society, and we have a guest vocalist on it, the erstwhile presidential candidate Pat Robertson, with a few words of wisdom, you might say.
Right, on tape.
Sampled, actually, and I'm playing them from the guitar.
All right, well, let's
do it.
Let's do it.
Just a few seconds. Folks, go watch that on your own time. But wow, what a band, too. Don Elias and Hiram Bullock was there. And
Omar Hakim on drums.
Omar Hakim.
Drummer.
Wow.
No, it was a fantastic band. And it was funny also, the Bulgarian wedding band of Ivo Papasov was also on that show that night. And Adrian Belew and Nona Hendricks and Pop Staples. I mean, I was thrilled to be hanging out with Pop Staples. He's such a killer.
That
Such
is great.
Guy.
I just wanted to drop a random thing in there because we're improvising, of course. But you know, that's something, folks. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put the link in the. But great show, right? Night music, right? That was
incredible.
Every Sunday night.
And Hal Wilner, you know, the dear departed Hal Wilner. He was one of the first to go from COVID.
Yeah.
You know, Hal was such an important figure in our scene. He loved music, the full spectrum of it, and he worked hard to bring, especially us weirdos, onto night music. He brought, you know, myself. He brought Kristen Markley, John Zorn, John Lurie, I think.
Yeah.
Even Adrian Belew is pretty far off the spectrum for mainstream television.
Absolutely. No.
But the thing was, it was on at 2 a.m. on Sunday nights on NBC, and they still had 2 or 3 million people tuning in. And they dropped it because they only had 2 or 3 million people tuning in on Sunday nights. They'd rather have an infomercial, you know, for some ridiculous thing, you know.
It was and what I love too, this is way before YouTube, folks. And as they went to commercial, they would play black and white archival, like Charlie Parker, Coltrane, whatever. Yeah. And at that time, we'd never seen that unless you bought like a VHS, a rare thing. So awesome. Well, that's a great place to, and folks, go. The Residents were on. You know, Todd Rundgren with Miles Davis. I mean, it was endless.
Yeah. Sonny Rollins.
Sonny Rollins
playing with Cohen.
Yeah. So, folks, if you're in the San Fran area, if you're so fortunate, please go look up the festival, which is an incredible festival that Elliott is doing a number of things, and certainly look for some video after the fact. It's called the Other Minds Festival, and I know that's going to be great. Make sure you check out this man's website. You got to run to keep up with this gentleman. He's nonstop, and we love it. It's so much.
And this Sunday in Los Angeles at the Highland Park with Jeff Parker and the Mutt Dogs with Mike Watt, Petra Hayden, and Motoka Honda.
Wow, and that's incredible. And that's on your page. It's on Elliott Sharp.
On my Facebook page, I post upcoming gigs. Yeah, I'm not a big Facebook, but it's useful for getting the word out.
Okay, yeah. People find that.
And I will send for anyone who's interested the links for my opera to the latest opera.
Beethoven. Astounding. Can't wait. Folks, chase down the new Terraplane, especially the new Nels Cline Elliott Sharp duo. Elliott's ebook. He's got a wonderful ebook out, and he's got the aggregate trio and his aggregate quintet, and his first all synthesis album, Phlogiston. Hopefully I got it right there.
Phlogiston.
Oh, I got to get that.
It was a medieval term for the chemical, the substance that everything contained that allowed it to burn.
Wow. Oh, that's, you know, I always enhance my science knowledge with you, bro, because it's, but that's what it's about, folks. Chase some of that stuff down. Support the independent artist. You know, we love that. Find his band camps, pick up some music, and Keep this man doing what he's doing. Elliott, thank you so much, bro. It was great to
Thank you so
hang out
much,
with you
Andre.
again.
It's such a pleasure to see you again and to take part in this.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for listening and watching.
Absolutely. Stick around for just a minute when I hang up. Folks, we'll be back in 2 weeks with Rocky George, the guitarist from Suicidal Tendencies, the Cro-Mags, Fishbone, and a bunch more. That's in 2 weeks on October 22nd. We'll see you here. Keep it weird. All right, we're off.